The man had no name worth saying anymore. They called him the blind cowboy in town, though no one in Hollowstone had seen him ride in years. His eyes had gone cloudy after the fire at Turner's Bluff. Some said it was whiskey, some said God. But he'd lived through that blaze when a dozen others hadn't. And now he kept to his ranch just outside the canyon's edge like a ghost, trying to remember who he used to be. His land was dry, scattered with horse bones and wind-eaten fence posts. His house leaned sideways in the dirt, as if trying to crawl underground. Inside, dust floated like ash, and the air smelled of lye soap, rawhide, and something lonelier than silence. He kept the place clean as best he could, but age and blindness had made small tasks feel like war. So he sent word to Hollowstone he needed a maid. Just someone to sweep the floors, cook a few meals, maybe read letters if any came, which they seldom did. He expected some Mexican girl or maybe an old widow come begging. What he got was neither. She stepped down from the wagon just past dusk, her figure lit by the last gold of the sun. Wore black like a mourner, though her face was dry and stern. Carried no bag save for a rolled-up shawl and a small bundle under her arm, swaddled tight. He stood on the porch, leaning against the cane he barely used. He could hear her footsteps, the slight drag in the left foot, the weight of her on the dry boards. "You're the maid?" he asked. His voice was low and cracked, worn down like river stone. "I'll cook, clean too if there's water," she said. "But I ain't a maid, I'm a widow." He tilted his head. "Widows are kind of maid, just not paid as well." She didn't laugh. "My name's Clara, I'm 6 months gone." She didn't say whose child it was, and he didn't ask. The first week she worked quiet. Up before dawn, heat water on the stove, boil beans, wipe down every surface with vinegar. She brought a sharpness with her, like she'd been through worse than hard living and come out the other side willing to bleed again. The cowboy noticed it in her silences, how her hands paused when touching the empty cradle he kept in the back room, a relic from a time he never spoke of. He didn't ask her why she'd come so far from town to raise a child in a place with no fence and no prayers. He figured the world had shoved her out, same as it had him. In the evenings, she read aloud from a book of Psalms. He never asked for it, but she did it anyway, in a low voice, steady and sharp-edged, not out of faith. Out of habit, maybe, the kind born from loss. On the 8th night, thunder rolled in from the canyon. The wind howled like some starving beast, and she came into the room without knocking. "There's a man out past the fence." "Been watching since sundown," she said. The cowboy stood slow, groped for the rifle near the hearth. "How many feet?" "Couldn't say, just one man, smoking." He smiled, though it was all teeth. "That ain't a local." "No. Locals don't watch, they just take." He stepped out into the night and listened, felt the wind curl around him. He could hear the horse's breath, the jingle of bit. Whoever it was didn't bother to hide. "Got a shotgun trained on your spine," the cowboy called out. A low laugh answered. "You ain't shot nobody in 10 years, old man." "Doesn't mean I forgot how." "Don't worry, I ain't here to collect nothin'. Just lookin' for a woman." "You found a graveyard." "Her name's Clara." Behind him, Clara stepped onto the porch. Her voice was steel. "I ain't yours." The man on the horse spat. "Ain't mine yet, but that boy inside you." "Might be." The cowboy raised the gun. "You get gone. Don't speak that way in front of my house." "My house now, is it?" the man said. You forget who you are, blind man. I remember just fine. I'm the one who lived. The thunder cracked loud and wild. The horseman turned and rode off into the dark, leaving only dust and the stink of tobacco. Clara stood still, her belly pressing against her coat. "You want to tell me who he was?" the cowboy asked. "No." He nodded, "All right." And that was the end of it, at least for that night. But something had shifted in the air, like blood on old wood. Something was coming, and both of them could smell it. Not justice, not yet, but a reckoning. And the child hadn't even been born. The rain came hard the next day, washing dust into ruts and turning the scrubland to clay. The wind carried it sideways against the window panes, and the air inside thickened with damp smoke from the hearth. Clara stayed busy, boiling shirts in lye, scraping soot from the stove, scrubbing every floorboard twice. It wasn't about the dirt. It was about control, the body doing what the heart couldn't. The cowboy sat in his chair, listening to the creak of her movement. He could map her by sound now, how she favored her right leg, the way her breathing changed when she bent over too far. He noticed her wincing sometimes, though she never made a sound about it. "You been hit before?" he asked. She didn't answer right off, just kept scrubbing. "I've been lots of things, a wife, a mule." A silence. He nodded like he could see her, like that helped. "What about you?" she said after a while. "You always been blind." He barked a short laugh. "No, that came later. After I saw too much." She looked over at him then, her jaw working something bitter behind her lips. "That man from last night, he won't let it go." "I gathered that." She stood, dried her hands on her apron. "When I left him, I was bleeding inside. Doc said I wouldn't carry again. Then I did, and he decided it was his child." "He wrong." "I don't know, and I don't care." The rain kept coming. By nightfall, the road out was slop, impassable. They sat together near the stove, neither speaking. The fire threw shadows against the walls like ghosts fighting. Somewhere deep in the house, the cradle creaked. He turned toward the sound. "You move that thing." "No." He stood, feeling the weight in the floorboards, the shift in pressure. His fingers wrapped around the rifle. They waited. The sound didn't come again, but the air had changed. A new smell, wet wool, old leather, and blood not fresh. Something had been in the house. Watching. Clara locked the back door. The cowboy didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with his coat pulled tight and the rifle across his knees. He couldn't see, but his hearing was sharp as broken glass. He heard the coyote calls, too many, heard one horse out in the trees pacing, restless. Something wasn't right. Come morning, the fence was cut. The well had mud in it. And nailed to the post out front was a strip of fabric, torn black cotton. Clara stared at it like it was a message she already knew. "That's from my old dress," she said. "The one I buried with my husband." The cowboy grunted. "Then someone's digging in places best left closed." They worked all day fixing what they could. He showed her how to set the tripwire traps. She taught him how to boil crushed pepper into oil that burned skin. By nightfall, their home had become a fortress, not much of one, but enough to slow a man down. That night, she brought out a pistol from the folds of her shawl, laid it on the table. "You know how to use it?" he asked. She picked it up, cocked the hammer, and let it fall. "I killed my husband with it, so yes." He nodded. Later, as she sat brushing her hair by the fire, he asked, "What was he like, your husband?" She stared into the flame. Soft voice. Bad hands. Did I hit you? Not at first. Just told me what I was worth. Made me small enough to fit in his shadow. The cowboy sipped from his tin cup. And when you didn't fit anymore. He got mean. Then he got dead. The wind outside picked up again, but this time it wasn't just weather. There were hoofbeats in the dark, 3 riders, slow, deliberate. The cowboy stood, feeling every inch of the floor beneath his boots. They come to take you. No, they come to take what I carry. She placed her hand on her belly. He turned toward the sound of the approaching horses. His voice was low. Then we best not let 'em. The first shot didn't come until well after midnight. It shattered the top window pane and buried itself into the far wall just above Clara's bed. She was already up, already armed. The cowboy had been standing for an hour, his ear tilted to the wind like a hound dog scenting murder. They didn't return fire, not yet. That would have given away too much. The house was dark inside. The oil lamps snuffed. Clara crouched low in the hallway, her back pressed to the wall, belly swollen and still. The cowboy knelt beside the wood stove, rifle aimed at the open gap where the door hung crooked. They testing us, he said, trying to draw us out. She whispered, they won't get close unless they're sure I'm here. They're sure. He didn't ask how she knew. A woman doesn't forget a man who tries to own her womb. Some violence stains permanent. Hours passed. The attackers circled but never breached. By dawn, one horse limped off, riderless. Clara had left the pepper oil-soaked wire low between 2 pines. She smiled when she heard the scream, though her face looked pale under it. You learned that in a war? He asked. No, I learned it in a kitchen. She moved slower now. The baby was settling low in her hips, and pain twisted her spine like a knife. But she didn't cry out. She just bit down and did what needed doing. That day they didn't cook. They melted lard and packed cartridges. They stripped blankets to weave into the windows. They nailed shut the back door. He gave her a dagger, once belonged to his brother who died out at Turner's Bluff. She held it with strange reverence, testing its weight like she'd carried its ghost before. That afternoon the preacher came. He was alone, rode a white mule and wore a brown coat so worn it had holes at both elbows. He didn't dismount, just stood in the yard, hat in hand, as the wind combed his thin hair. The cowboy stepped out, rifle not raised but near enough. Preacher. John. They hadn't spoken in 7 years, not since the fire. But old things have a way of digging themselves up when blood is in the wind. You come to read scripture or bury bodies. Neither, I come to warn. He looked at Clara then, who stood just behind the cowboy, hands cradling her belly. The man after her, he's paying folks in Hollowstone. Promised land, horses, gold, said she stole from him, said she murdered a righteous man. He was neither, Clara said. The preacher nodded once, slow. I know, but righteousness don't matter when there's money and a mob. The cowboy's voice came hard. They coming here. By nightfall, maybe 15 men, some drunk, some mean, all dangerous. Why you tellin' us? Because I've buried too many women already. He left them then, rode off slow, shoulders slumped like a man already grieving. By dusk they had all but sealed the house, only one way in left, the front. They stacked wood in the hallway, doused it with oil, packed flour in the corners to make smoke catch fast. Clara wore her hair braided, tied back with wire. Her sleeves were rolled and her eyes were cold and ready. "I won't survive this," she said. "You might. But if I don't, and that child does, he'll live. You swear it." He reached out, his rough hand brushing her wrist. "I swear on the ashes of my blood." She nodded, the sun dropped like a hammer, and with it came the men. 15 riders, 1 cart, torches, pistols, rope. They wanted a hanging, but they didn't get one. They got a war. They came from the east, cutting across the scrub like coyotes too dumb to know better. The sky behind them was bruised purple, bleeding into black. Torches high, boots thudding, the smell of liquor thick enough to choke the stars. The cowboy sat cross-legged behind the low wall near the porch, rifle across his knees, breathing like it was Sunday morning. Clara waited by the front window, pistol in hand, wick of lamp oil stuffed into 2 mason jars beside her. She wrapped her belly tight in cloth to brace the weight, no fear in her eyes, just fury pressed down so hard it looked like calm. At first the men shouted, called her a whore, a thief, a killer, told her to come out and they'd be kind. She didn't answer, then came the threats. They listed the things they'd do to her, to the baby, called her belly cursed, said they'd tear it from her like rot from a tree. Still she stayed quiet. The cowboy's voice rose into the dark, "Go home. You're chasing a lie told by a man who couldn't keep her." Laughter from the dark. "We don't care what's true, blind man. We care what he's paying." And then the shooting started. The first man stepped into the yard and dropped before he reached the gate. Clara had the pistol leveled through the hole in the shutter, the glass already gone. 1 shot, neck high. The man gurgled and clawed the dirt. A second tried the left side, triggered the wire trap. Pepper oil caught his eyes, and he screamed so loud the others froze. The cowboy waited for sound, then took out the third. Rifle round to the gut, right where his belt buckle gleamed. They kept coming, not all at once. Pairs, then singles, drunk bravery, no tactics. Clara moved room to room, keeping low. She shot a fourth through the kitchen wall, knew the angle from memory. Knew the wood was soft enough to let a bullet through. The fire was saved for last. When the 7th man lit his torch and stepped toward the porch, she hurled the jar. It shattered at his feet. Flames rushed up his legs like hunger. He screamed into the night and ran until someone else put him out with a bullet to the head. By then the house was coughing smoke. The flower traps caught, choking the air, making it hard to see, harder to breathe. But that was the plan. The cowboy moved through the hall like a blind snake, hands brushing the walls. He could hear each footstep outside. The last 2 men made it to the porch. One burst through the door. He met Clara just inside. She drove the knife through his throat so deep it stuck. Blood sprayed the wall. Her belly hit the floor as she fell with him. The other one fired wild. A bullet caught the cowboy in the shoulder, spinning him hard into the wall. But his rifle didn't drop. He chambered another round, lifted it one-handed, and fired. The last man dropped dead in the doorway. Then there was quiet, not peace, but quiet. Smoke drifted like ghosts in the rafters. The house groaned. Clara dragged herself to the rocker by the hearth, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the blood-wet handle of the knife. The cowboy sat in the corner, panting through his teeth. Blood leaked down his arm and pooled beneath him. "Dead?" Clara asked. "All of 'em." "You hit bad." "Feels like it." She nodded. "Rest, I'll fix it." He heard her stand, heard her grit her teeth against the weight of her unborn child, and he thought, She's not just a survivor. She's a storm wearing a woman's skin. He passed out thinking of fire and screams and the sound of her footsteps moving through the ash. He woke to the smell of blood and boiled water. The wound in his shoulder burned like hell, but it was bound tight with cloth that smelled faintly of lye and mint. Somewhere, a kettle hissed. He blinked into nothing, forgetting for a moment the blindness, until the pain reminded him where he was. And who he wasn't anymore. Clara was singing. Low, rough-edged, something old, words he didn't recognize, likely not meant for him. He could hear her shifting cloth, the dip of a ladle, the clink of metal in a basin. "You still alive?" she asked. "Barely." "Then we're even." She crossed the room and pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. Her hand lingered a second longer than it had any right to. He didn't speak of it, and neither did she. Outside, the world had gone still. No birds, no riders, just the wind dragging across the canyon like a whisper trying not to be heard. Clara kept her pistol within reach now, tucked into the folds of her apron. The knife she cleaned twice a day, always with fresh water. Her hands moved slower than before, her belly rode lower. The child was coming sooner than it should. "How many days we got?" the cowboy asked. "Not days, hours." He nodded, felt the weight of it settle across the room. "You done this before." She shook her head, then remembered he couldn't see her. "No, but I helped others, back when I was clean, before my husband marked me with a belt and a sermon." He didn't press. He didn't need to. Some truths you can hear in the air between words. The preacher returned just after sundown, walked up the trail with his hat in his hands and a grave in his eyes. "You buried the bodies?" the cowboy asked. "No." "Left them where they fell. Let the buzzards earn their keep." "Oh, good." The preacher looked at Clara, at the tension in her jaw, the way her arms curled around her middle like armor. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." He nodded. "I'll stay. Help where I can." She hesitated. "You ever midwifed before?" "I've read scripture beside dying girls. That's close enough." By nightfall, the labor began. The pain came in waves, pulling Clara under, leaving her breathless. She didn't scream. Not once, just bit into a strip of leather and kept her eyes locked on the rafters. The cowboy lay in the other room, shoulder bleeding through the bandage, fingers twitching every time she groaned. He wanted to go to her, say something worth the weight of the moment, but his legs wouldn't carry him, and words were brittle things when life was cracking open in the room beside you. Hours passed. Blood soaked the sheets. The preacher prayed soft under his breath, wiped sweat from Clara's brow, held her hand as she clenched her teeth so hard a molar cracked. The child came into the world long after midnight, not crying, wheezing, blue around the lips. The preacher worked quick, faster than he looked, tied the cord, cleared the lungs, wrapped the boy in the cowboy's old coat. "Breath in now," he said. "Barely, but he is." Clara lay back hollow-eyed, her face wet with tears she hadn't noticed. "Let me see him," she whispered. The preacher placed the boy in her arms. She held him like something she'd bled for, which she had. Her hands shook, her lips trembled, but her grip was strong. The cowboy, still weak but dragging himself toward the room's edge, whispered, "He's got lungs like a fighter." "He has your silence," she said, "and my fury." They named him Samuel, no middle name, no father's name, just a beginning. And in the quiet that followed, they sat together, Clara, the cowboy, the preacher, and the child who carried what little future the world had left. But the fire wasn't done burning yet, and someone still had to answer for the men they sent. The bodies were gone by morning, not buried, taken. Dragged off in the night, their trails streaking through the dust like bloody brush strokes. No vultures circled, no crows, just silence. The preacher said nothing, but he looked west toward Hollowstone and crossed himself 3 times. "They don't leave their own behind," Clara muttered, still pale, cradling Samuel to her chest. She sat by the open window, the breeze crawling in like a warning. The child suckled, slow, fragile but stubborn, eyes shut tight. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her face had the drawn, gray cast of someone hovering between this world and the next, but her hands were steady. The cowboy sat wrapped in a blanket beside the stove, shoulder stiff, bandage yellow with seeped blood. He cleaned his rifle piece by piece, each motion slow, deliberate. "They'll come again," he said, "not drunk this time." "Not dumb." The preacher nodded. This wasn't a mob, it was a message. Clara's voice was hollow. "Then let's send one back." She didn't wait for a vote. That evening she packed what little she could carry: salt, dried beans, clean rags, the pistol, and the child strapped close to her chest. She wore the black shawl again, though now it bore a tear from shoulder to hip, like a scar. The preacher watched her cinch a knife to her thigh. "You sure you want to ride?" She looked up. "I don't want to." "I have to." The cowboy turned his head toward her. "You walk into Hollowstone, it's not just your blood they'll want." "I'm not going to Hollowstone," she said. "Not yet. I'm going to Blacktail Ridge." Even the preacher flinched at that name. "That's where his men came from," she added. "That's where the bastard lives, the one who thinks my womb belongs to him." The cowboy exhaled slow. "You'll need help." "You're not coming." "Didn't say I was. But I know someone meaner than me." His name was Hatch, used to ride for the Confederacy, lost half his face to a bayonet and the other half to whiskey, lived in a burned-out mill 3 ridges east, shot at clouds when he got bored. The cowboy sent the preacher to fetch him. By the time they returned, Hatch was already loaded up: long gun, 2 pistols, a bag full of bones he called dice. His left eye was glass. His right looked like a bullet scar grown teeth. He took one look at Clara and spat. "You're the reason half Hollowstone's on fire." She didn't blink, not yet. He grinned, showing blackened teeth. "I'll ride." They left that night, Clara, Hatch, and the preacher. The cowboy stayed behind with the child, arms still useless, but eyes sharp to every sound. He kept Samuel in a sling across his chest, rifle by the door, knife in the table. He didn't expect mercy. He expected visitors. Clara rode through the canyon under a sky sharp with stars. The preacher beside her, murmuring psalms he didn't believe in anymore. Hatch led the way, chewing dried bark and humming murder ballads. Blacktail Ridge wasn't a town. It was a wound that never closed. Rusted wagons, pitched tents, miners too broke to leave, whores too tired to fake joy. And at the top of the hill, a house with fresh paint, white curtains, and a porch too clean. He lived there, Reuben Cade. The man who claimed Clara's unborn as his own, who hired others to take her back like stolen property. He came from river money, oil money, liked his women barefoot and bled dry. He was sitting with a bottle and a woman on each knee when Hatch fired a warning shot through the parlor window. Screams, shattered glass, panic. Clara kicked in the front door. Reuben stood, mouth wide. "You come to die, Clara." She raised the pistol. "No, I came to show you what that feels like." He laughed. "You don't have the guts." So she shot him, once in the thigh, once in the chest. He dropped like something unstrung. The women screamed. Hatch held them at bay. The preacher stood by the doorway, lips pressed to prayer, though no words came. Clara walked up, pressed the muzzle to Reuben's temple. He whimpered, "You need me. You need a name for that bastard child." She leaned in. "He's already got one, and it ain't yours." She pulled the trigger, the pistol clicked, empty. She stared at it, then dropped it, turned, and left him there bleeding, sobbing, ruined. She didn't need to kill him. He'd never walk again. He'd never breathe easy, and worst of all, he'd have to live with the fact she spared him. That was the kind of wound that didn't heal. By morning, they rode back through the canyon, but home was already changing, smoke in the sky. Boot prints around the well, and a message scrawled in ash on the side of the house. "You took what was mine." The cowboy stood over the message, one hand on the rifle, the other cradling the child who whimpered against his chest. The letters were smeared with soot, written finger-thick along the wall beneath the eaves. "You took what was mine." He traced the shape of it with his thoughts, not his fingers. The brush of ash in the wind told him enough. It hadn't rained, no prints inside. No bodies, just the smell of fire that hadn't burned. Clara dismounted slow, her legs trembled. Blood stained the saddle beneath her thighs, but she stayed upright. Samuel stirred at the sound of her voice. She saw the words and said nothing. Only nodded once, jaw clenched. The preacher crossed himself again, but Hatch only spat and muttered, "Pigs never die easy." Inside the house, everything was just a little wrong. Chair turned sideways. A kettle moved off the stove. The trapdoor to the root cellar left ajar, though it hadn't been opened in weeks. They cleared the house in silence. Clara took Samuel from the cowboy and fed him while sitting on the floor beside the hearth, pistol across her lap, knife tucked into her boot. She didn't ask who'd written the message. She knew it was Reuben. He wouldn't have dragged himself across the hills bleeding from 2 holes, and he wouldn't have left her breathing. There was someone else, a hand she hadn't seen yet. "She left something," Hatch said, kneeling at the base of the wall. He held up a strip of fabric, pale blue with faded white flowers. Clara stared, her mouth dried. "That's my sister," she said. The cowboy turned. "You never said you had a sister." "She died 10 years back, drowned in a trough. At least that's what we were told." "She was younger. By 2 years nicer," smiled too easy. The preacher stepped back from the wall. "Then who the hell left this?" There was no answer, just the slow creak of the wind through the bones of the house. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in the rocker, knife in one hand, Samuel in the other. Hatch bedded down near the barn, hat over his face, pistol cocked beside him. The preacher rode out before dawn, said he had to speak with someone who owed him truths, and the cowboy just waited. The blindness didn't stop him from feeling the shift in the land, a heaviness, like something sacred had been disturbed. The morning after, they found another message. This one scrawled on the cradle with a child's burnt doll placed gently inside. "You made a ghost of me." Clara stared at it for a long time. Her voice was small. "She used to say that, when our stepfather," she stopped, bit her lip until it bled. She'd whisper it, "You made a ghost of me." The cowboy said nothing. Just waited for her to find the strength he already knew she had. She's not dead, Clara said. She was taken. Reuben didn't just want heirs, he wanted breeding stock. The word tasted like bile, but she didn't flinch. I left her behind, I ran, and now she wants to take Samuel. She won't get the chance, the cowboy said. They spent 3 days fortifying the land, dug trenches, posted lookout points, covered the well. They moved the cradle into the cellar and slept beside it, one ear always to the wind. On the fourth night, the wind died completely. The world went still, and someone knocked, not pounded, not shouted, just a knock, once, then twice. Then silence. Clara stood, walked to the door, her breath steady, hands not shaking. The cowboy moved behind her, rifle aimed low. Hatch stood at the window, watching. She opened the door. There was a woman standing alone in the dark. Pale hair, dirty dress, bare feet, Clara gasped. Eva. The woman smiled. Her teeth were too white, her eyes too calm. I came for what you left behind, Eva said. Clara stepped out onto the porch. You want my son. Eva shook her head. No, I want your fear. I want your guilt. The child is just the chain. Clara reached for her knife. Then I'll cut it. Eva lunged. The cowboy fired. Once. Eva fell backward, blood blooming from her chest like spilled wine. But she didn't scream, didn't curse. She smiled as she bled. I'll still have him, she whispered, even in death. Then she was gone. In the silence that followed, Clara dropped to her knees. Samuel cried in the cellar below, as if sensing the ghost had passed. Hatch said nothing. The preacher never returned. Clara buried Eva beneath the old sycamore, marking the grave with nothing but stones. Family don't mean right, she whispered. The cowboy stood behind her. No, it means memory. She turned to him. I'll raise him here, teach him to shoot, to survive, to see even in the dark. You won't be alone. I never was. The wind picked up again, and the land held quiet, not peace. But quiet, the kind that follows the last reckoning, where the dead sleep and the living watch the horizon, waiting for the next knock or the next birth, whichever came first.